Tonight, the unprecedented cyclone recovery effort. Farmers' heartbreak over stock and crop losses. Barnaby Joyce visits devastated cane fields. And a strong police presence to keep our communities safe.
Across Mackay and central Queensland, this is 7 News with Rob Bruff.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us for this special Queensland Flood Bulletin. It's been nearly 2 weeks now since Tropical Cyclone Debbie smashed into the North Queensland coast and then made her slow but savage way south. The storm's impact was felt from Bowen to the Gold Coast and into New South Wales, with thousands of homes destroyed or damaged and tens of thousands more left without power for days. Property, stock and crop losses are estimated in the billions. Luxury island resorts in the Whitsundays were torn apart and may never recover. Floodwaters swamped low-lying towns and isolated others. And days after Debbie, Rockhampton braced for the Fitzroy River to swell and overflow. Reporter Susan Ross has been following the Fitzroy's progress. Susan, it's been an anxious and exhausting weekend for Rocky residents.
That's right, Rob. The river here in Rockhampton is finally starting to recede. The gauge behind me is sitting just under 8 metres and it's expected to fall below the major flood level tonight. Residents are now facing a huge clean-up with hundreds of homes and businesses affected by the flood. They're not on their own though. 140 firefighters and SES volunteers have now moved in to help with the clean-up for the rest of the week. As the floodwater receded, strike teams moved in. They've been going from street to street, washing down driveways and homes.
The water is slowly receding, and once it gets to about 7.5 metres, that's our moderate flood level, and that will just about give us access to all inundated properties so that we can progress through the clean-up.
The flood has left behind layers of thick mud.
Just hosing before it dries, otherwise you've got to brush.
Mates are helping mates with the huge clean-up.
Even before it started, everybody was ringing and saying, oh, you need help, it's all good. Yeah, it brings the community together for sure. 60
members of the Defence Force have also been put to work.
The guys were pretty keen to get in, lend a hand and support the SES and the fire service as well.
They worked quickly, bringing down the temporary flood barrier in Berthica. It was so effective at protecting around 400 homes, the council's now looking to extend it to other streets. Deputy Premier Jackie Trad toured the flood zone today.
We know that Rockhampton is subject to flooding, but every single time it floods, it is heartbreaking.
The government will be doing a major review into the effectiveness of the state's disaster management system.
We review all of the preparations, all of the immediate responses, and then as we go into recovery, how we can do recovery better.
Engineers will be assessing the main runway at the airport tomorrow. The council's hopeful it'll reopen at the end of the week.
Because of the weight of planes, of course, we have to consider the subsurface under and make sure that it is dried out sufficient to take the weight.
Even though there's not a formal mud army, people are being asked to lend a hand.
We have crews actually door-knocking residences and informing them of where they can get funding, where they can get assistance through the local council. 7
strike teams will be working through the hardest hit streets to get the city back to normal as soon as possible.
This time tomorrow we should have the Bruce Highway back where it's meant to be and most of our communities into those final stages of clean-up.
Susan Ross, 7 News.
Thank you very much, Susan. Farmers are facing millions of dollars in livestock and crop losses after the record-breaking rain. Cattle and family pets were washed away and whole fields were lost in severe flash flooding.
From the sky, the devastation is daunting. Rivers have turned to oceans, isolating rural properties. Where the water has receded, kilometres of mud has killed crops.
Yeah, it is devastating. It is what it is. Yeah, but sounds a bit stupid. You just can't really think about it.
Duringa Station, west of Rockhampton, lost 1,000 hectares of cotton. The crop was worth $5 million and was only 6 weeks from harvest.
Probably 12 months in the making by the time, keeping paddocks clean of weeds, pre-applying fertiliser.
Further north, farmers around Lotus and Clark Creeks were prepared for a cyclone, but not for more than 1,000 millimetres of rain in just 24 hours.
Tired. We spent 2 days, 2 nights of not being tired because it was just absolutely horrifying.
Thousands of head of cattle, horses and household pets were swept away.
They prepared, they did everything they could to get ready for this, and it's like losing a member of the family for these people. It's devastated them.
The getters had half a metre of water flow through the top floor of their two-storey home.
Well, we left our videos, our family videos from when the children were very small and growing up. That was our main loss.
Other buildings were destroyed. Fences were wiped out. The Clark Creek Primary School of just 11 students was inundated. The devastation has been heartbreaking for long-time farming families.
These are bush people. They're stoic, they're resilient, they're used to dealing with this, but it's rocked them to the core. And you look at a grown man who's got his eyes red from crying for days, and his wife sobbing, saying he's not coping, I don't know what to do.
Aussie Helpers is now fundraising to help them get through.
They are leading the way with getting some support in a financial sense back to these people, and God knows they're going to need it.
Susan Ross, 7 News.
Meanwhile, residents across Queensland are being warned that we may have to pay more for fruit and vegetables after crops were wiped out in the cyclone. In the Whitsundays alone, hundreds of millions of dollars has been lost in produce.
Once a flourishing food bowl, now ripped apart. Paddocks are completely flattened and livelihoods left in tatters. Scenes of devastation echoed throughout Bowen.
Most producers and directly in Bowen are probably 100% lost on crops. But in saying that, we're all back in.
The region provides tomatoes, capsicums, beans, corn and pumpkins. In the Whitsundays alone, more than $100 million has been lost in produce. That number will only grow. The damage done to mango crops is still being assessed. It's expected to run into the millions. It could take up to 5 years for crops to fully recover.
Have experienced devastation from the cyclone Debbie, from crops being wiped out through to farming equipment and farming sheds being lost.
Producers as far as the Sunshine Coast are reeling from Debbie's devastation.
It's not quite a few trees over, probably about half the crop went down.
Locals are being warned to expect the cost of fruit and vegetables to rise significantly in the coming weeks. Prices are expected to peak in August.
There is going to be short supply as Bowen season would normally hit come May and June. Consumers will see an increase in price on the affected stock.
Farmers in Bowen have already started planting lost crops. Shoppers are being urged to buy local produce whenever they can, even if it's a little more pricey.
Wherever possible, we will continue supporting the local growers when they're ready to go.
And help North Queensland's food capital find its feet again. Georgia Terry, 7 News.
Acting Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce visited Proserpine yesterday afternoon to see the devastation firsthand. Mr Joyce spoke to flood-hit cane growers faced with losses of more than $150 million, with the harvest just weeks away.
The politicians toured crops that were flattened when Cyclone Debbie brought wind gusts of nearly 100 kilometres an hour.
And it's only right and proper that the people who are the servants of the public, politicians, make their way here and make sure that the voices of North Queenslanders are well and truly held.
The hardest hit areas of Proserpine, Mackay and Plain Creek have seen 100% crop damage. As well as wind damage, farmers are facing the fear of waterlogged cane rotting. The harvest was meant to be just weeks away. Cyclonic winds twisted the cane in different directions.
You can see the sugar cane around here. It's been absolutely smashed left, right and crooked.
The government is working to make sure disaster assistance reaches those in need.
The Whitsunday region from Bowen south is known for three things: horticulture, fruit and veggies, for cane and for tourism. And today we've seen how Queenslanders in those three areas are building themselves back up again.
The damage is likely to take a major chunk out of Australia's sugar exports. Around $81 million will be lost from the Mackay region and $50 million from Proserpine.
So if you're watching this broadcast in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, particularly those big cities, please know that the Whitsundays is open for business.
Lauren Morris, 7 News.
Georgia Doan has the latest now on what police have been doing to keep looters away and the community safe during the floods in Rockhampton.
I'm joined here by Superintendent Ron Van Zane from the Rockhampton Police Group. Ron, what role have police played in the floods and what resources have you brought in?
Yeah, look, our major role throughout this event is to maintain the safety of the community, also to prepare them, that's the District Disaster Management Group hat that I wear, to prepare the community for the flood event, but the police themselves, it's maintain safety, look after the welfare of the people that are faced with this sort of event that's arriving, and the resources we've had an extra 60 police in general turn up, and they have been a number of specialists from water police, police divers. We've had Polair, the helicopter, with a number of their staff. We've had the mounted unit, and the rest have been general duties, and they've been from all over the region.
And can you tell me a bit more about Polair? So what role has it played?
Polair's number one objective throughout the time is to stop crime being committed on the people that are living and in the flood inundated areas, and that are being targeted by criminals.
And so now as the water starts to recede, how will you be helping flood-affected residents?
Well, now it'll be about, again, protecting their premises, stopping people driving through the roads and the areas that have still got some water in them, providing any assistance we can for people that are going through major hardship, and just to be there to protect them and to give them any support we can through this terrible time for them.
Thanks, Ron. Extra crews will be patrolling the streets. The big clean-up begins.
Thank you very much, Georgia. It'll take weeks for the state's coal industry to return to normal. A number of key transport links are out of action and needing repair. Resources Minister Matt Canavan expects 13 million tonnes of coking coal exports to be delayed.
We're very thankful that there has not been major disruptions to production at coal mines in our region, and that through stockpiling and extra capacity in the months to come, we don't expect that we'll lose much export.
The Blackwater rail line is expected to be reopened tomorrow. The Newlands and Marrow lines should both be open by the end of the week. But Goonyella's repairs won't be finished until next month. Well, ahead tonight, how the natural disaster has hurt businesses in their busiest time, and the financial support on offer to help people recover. Nice having you with us on this special Sunday edition of 7 News. Local businesses have certainly taken a hit, with the cyclone and floods causing some tourists to cancel their holiday plans. Susan Ross has the latest on how tourism bodies plan to encourage people to visit for the holidays.
Yes, I'm joined here with Deanne Bowd from Capricorn Enterprise in Rockhampton. And it's not just the businesses that were flooded that have been suffering from this event. Deanne, how has the flood affected some of our local businesses in Rockhampton?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. Small businesses and local businesses are really feeling a pinch. This time of year is normally peak for us, and what this weather event has actually done is make people who had already booked cancel.
Do you know exactly how big the loss could be for some of these businesses?
We do know that it will be in the millions. We've only had, at the moment, a couple of operators giving us figures, and it's in the $80,000 in 6 days is one thing that's being bandied around, and that's a big loss. When you think about accommodation, though, those some of them actually have tour groups that are going out to visit the attractions and visit the islands. So that loss of $80,000 in one property actually spreads out across the whole industry.
And what will Capricorn Enterprise be doing to help these businesses get back on their feet?
We actually have a social media campaign that we planned to have out at this time anyway, so we sort of put a bit of a stall on that for a small time, and that's now out in market, so hopefully people will be seeing that. That's being delivered to people within our core markets of the 400-kilometre radius of the region.
And the weather is beautiful. What would your message be to people that are considering coming to visit?
This is why it's peak, is because this is the most beautiful part of the year for us.
And there's still a week of school holidays left and Easter next weekend for visitors to come to this area.
Good on you, Susan. It's looking pretty good. More than $10 million has already been handed out to Queenslanders who were badly affected by Tropical Cyclone Debbie. 25,000 people have now received grants, allowing them to buy the essentials such as clothes and medication. Residents in Rockhampton who have been impacted by the floods can now also apply for support services, grants and emergency funds.
They can go in and get rid of anything that's wet. All we would ask is that they take a photograph of it, make a note of serial numbers, that type of thing. But they really should feel free to get rid of old carpet, any appliances that are wet.
More financial assistance information can be found on the state's government's Community Recovery website. We'll take a break. Coming up in a moment, a couple finally tied the knot after their Dream Island wedding was shattered by Debbie. And a very lucky little bird finds shelter from the storm. Welcome back to this special Sunday edition of 7 News. Well, amidst the tragedy of stock losses and displaced wildlife in the floods, occasionally there's some good news. A seabird has landed in the hands of a wildlife carer after surviving around a 100-kilometre journey from Bowen to Collinsville, blown inland by Cyclone Debbie.
Caught up in the destructive winds of Cyclone Debbie, this little seabird was found stranded a long way from home, Collinsville, in fact.
And normally they're not a bird that will sort of hang out on the land very often. They eat on the wing, they even sleep on the wing.
While houses were ripped apart, the sooty tern somehow managed to survive on a wing and a prayer.
Unfortunately, what happens is it's quite a small bird and they get caught in the storm way out over the ocean and it just simply blows them in over land.
The bird has since landed in the care of Deborah Carter in Townsville. She says it's a miracle he survived the treacherous journey.
They just get absolutely exhausted from being battered by the storm and run out of steam because they're only very small.
He's still very weak and cannot fly. Deborah's feeding him Polyade, a bird medicine to boost his energy and give him vitamins and minerals. She's also caring for an orphaned frogmouth, which was blown out of his tree last week and he's lost his fight to fly. And Australia Zoo is taking care of 8 koalas from Hamilton Island, also displaced from the cyclone.
The koalas, of course, their greatest drama was the fact that there's no more leaf. The leaves were literally blown off the trees and some of the eucalyptus trees blown over.
The zoo will be the koalas' new home until the island has fully recovered. Lauren Cooney, 7 News.
Well, the cyclone also disrupted the wedding plans of dozens of couples who'd planned to tie the knot in a fantasy island setting. Luxury resorts like Daydream Island were torn apart in a weekend as the wedding guests became hostages to the storm. One set of newlyweds had family and friends out from the UK. Luckily, a Gold Coast hotel came to their rescue.
The bride is traditionally a little late, but try 12 days late, far away from Daydream Island, but still in every way a dream wedding. We first met Stacey Easton and Matt Kenny last week after this Daydream Island nightmare.
All we were worried about is that we were all safe, and we were, so.
But their wedding plans were ruined.
How are you going to work this wedding out?
Who knows?
The Hilton in Surfers Paradise saw that interview and didn't just come to the party, they threw the party, provided accommodation and hosted this ceremony where this afternoon the couple said, "I do."
They've been phenomenal and we cannot thank them enough.
It can take months to plan a wedding. The Hilton had a week.
The generosity they've showed us is just amazing.
Well, they're all just about to sit down to a 3-course dinner at the Hilton's new restaurant, Catch. Just another example of the community coming together to help those affected by Cyclone Debbie.
Just so pleased that it worked out and we got the opportunity to look after them.
A fairy tale ending and beginning of this couple's lives together. On the Gold Coast, Amanda Abate, 7 News.
You have to enjoy a happy ending. We'll take a break in a moment. Liv joins us to have a look back at Cyclone Debbie and what we've learned from the weather event. Nice having you with us on this special edition of 7 News. Now, Debbie's fury marked the end of a late start to the cyclone season. And as Livio explains, an extreme storm like this will become a case study for future forecasting.
Well, Tropical Cyclone Debbie's dominated Queensland's weather for almost 3 weeks now, and of course it'll take many more days for the floodwaters trapped in the enormous Fitzroy catchment to fully drain out to sea. Long, slow flood, this one. Little bit of history. Debbie was announced a tropical cyclone on March 25th when it quickly reached Cat 2 before thrusting its engines and heading towards Townsville. Next day, it just waffled around and didn't grow too much, but on March 27, Debbie went off like a firecracker and strengthened to Cat 4 in just 12 hours. Hamilton Island recorded Queensland's strongest ever wind gust of 263 kilometres an hour as Debbie approached the coast on the morning of Tuesday 28th. And when the eye crossed Early Beach just after midday, the cyclone virtually stopped moving, exposing the Whitsunday coast to several hours of harrowing wind and driving rain. Even Collinsville recorded Cat 2 strength winds, and the Laguna Keys had a 2.6 metre storm surge. Lucky it wasn't higher. Now, Debbie became an ex-cyclone on the 29th, but didn't die quietly, smashing out a broad path of carnage from central Queensland right down to northern New South Wales. A metre of rain flooded the Pioneer River system in just 2 days, with similar rainfall sending a wall of water into the mighty Fitzroy catchment, resulting in the recent peak of almost 9 metres at Rocky. The ghost of Debbie passed directly over the Brisbane CBD on Thursday, March 30th, and pushed out to sea and delivered one final death blow to northern New South Wales. Debbie's arrival marked the latest start to a cyclone season in Queensland's history, apart from 2 seasons which didn't produce any cyclones at all. I'd say it was mostly just bad luck, because for many weeks the Coral Sea was well primed for cyclone breeding. The Weather Bureau did a sterling job forecasting Debbie's trail, and of course events like these always become a case study for the Bureau to fine-tune its future techniques. Cyclone Debbie was undoubtedly an extreme event, but in the land of dearth and deluge, extremes are the norm, not the exception. Average is just drought plus flood divided by 2, and events like these, buried in a timeless sea of drought, are the lifeblood that sustain our unique landscape and all its ecosystems. Back to you, Rob.
Good on you, Liv. Thank you very much, mate. Nice having you company, folks, for this special edition of 7 News. Enjoy your evening viewing here on 7. We'll catch you tomorrow night at 6. From the team, take care. Good night.